Friends, every week we put a lot of effort into creating spine-chilling animated horror stories for you. So, if you are enjoying the stories on our channel, Horror Nights Case Files, please subscribe and don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest videos. This is the story of Annie, a 25-year-old British journalist who had come to London to shoot a documentary on paranormal investigations. She had heard that the Langham Hotel, a famous and luxurious antique hotel in London, was haunted. Years ago, a doctor and his wife had come there for their honeymoon and stayed in room 333. However, the doctor murdered his wife inside the room and then took his own life. It is said that the doctor's spirit has wandered room 333 ever since. But Annie's mindset was logical and evidence-based. Throughout her career, she had investigated numerous cases where she had exposed the truth behind supposedly haunted locations, revealing them to be hoaxes. She decided to uncover the mystery of room 333 herself. Her plan was simple: spend one night there and then move on, just as she had with other cases. Little did she know, however, that this was about to become the most terrifying experience of her life. The path from the Langham Hotel's main entrance to the check-in desk was lined with plush carpeting and adorned with massive paintings. Carrying a suitcase in one hand and a camera bag in the other, Annie arrived at the reception. The receptionist greeted her with a broad smile. But the moment Annie presented her booking confirmation for room 333, the receptionist's face went blank for a split second, and her hands froze in mid-motion. When Annie asked what was wrong, the receptionist simply said, "Sorry, ma'am," and forced a smile again. Annie had stayed in many hotels for work, and these days, almost all of them provided key cards instead of traditional keys. So, when the receptionist handed her a physical key with an awkward smile, she felt a bit strange. The hotel was bustling with activity, but the atmosphere on the third floor was entirely different. The corridor was completely deserted. Room 333 was located at the far end. The walls were lined with old paintings whose colors had faded. The wall lamps cast a dim, yellow light that made the shadows of objects appear unusually deep. The carpet looked ancient, as if it hadn't been cleaned in ages. With every step, the wooden floorboards beneath her feet creaked softly. The door was made of dark, polished wood and featured a heavy brass handle. When Annie grasped it, the metal felt unnaturally cold. As the door opened, she was greeted by darkness. She set her suitcase down, turned on her phone's flashlight, and began searching for the light switches. The room was decorated in a Victorian style, featuring a large king-sized bed, a teak dressing table, and a full-length mirror mounted on the wall directly facing the bed. She finally located the switchboard near the bed. But the moment she turned on the lights, a loud noise erupted from the doorway. Startled, she slowly turned around to see that her suitcase, which she had left outside, had toppled over. She brought the suitcase inside, took off her coat, unzipped the bag, and unpacked her recording equipment. She set everything up systematically, first the tripod, then the camera, and finally the microphone. Dusk had settled, and night was falling. Annie ordered a sandwich and sat comfortably on the sofa in the corner of the room. It was November, so she felt a slight chill in the air. She lit a small fire in the room's fireplace and began researching the hotel room's features on her laptop. Her plan was simple. She would record the room that night and review her experience. She had everything set up. The camera was rolling, the mic was on, and Annie was lost in the online world. She didn't even realize when she drifted off to sleep. A while later, a knock at the door woke her up. Groggy with sleep, she didn't quite understand what was happening. But then, the knocking sound came again, this time accompanied by a man's voice saying, "Room service, madam." Yet Annie had only ordered a sandwich, which had already been delivered quite some time ago. Confused, Annie got up. Perhaps someone else's order had been brought to her room by mistake. She tried to look through the peephole. A butler was standing outside, holding a tray with a plate covered by a large lid. Her eyes shut. When she composed herself, the butler had vanished into thin air. She was completely alone in the corridor. Confused and terrified, Annie rushed back into her room and checked the camera recordings. The memory card was corrupted. How was that possible? She had cross-checked every device during the setup. She checked her voice recorder too. Nothing had been captured. Neither the knocking sound nor the butler's voice. Only the sounds of the door, the man, and her own scream had been recorded. It was 1 a.m. The fire was still burning in the fireplace, yet the room remained bitterly cold. Unable to make sense of it all, Annie went to the bathroom to splash water on her face. That was when she saw something truly horrifying in the mirror. Standing right behind her was a man with an innocent-looking face but long, jagged fingernails. His face looked as though it had been flayed. He wore tattered Victorian-era clothing. He looked exactly like the figure from the doctor's story Annie had read. His hand began to reach toward her, as if to strangle her. But when she spun around, there was no one there. Annie was gripped by fear. The room no longer felt safe. She hurriedly packed her belongings and tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if someone had locked her inside. Just then, all the lights in room 333 began to flicker. Amidst the flickering lights, Annie saw that terrifying man again. His entire body was stark white. He was slowly approaching her. Annie began screaming loudly for help. Hearing the screams, 2 or 3 hotel staff members rushed into Annie's room. They found her in a state of sheer terror. She was banging her head against the bathroom mirror and screaming at the top of her lungs. The mirror was almost completely shattered, and shards had cut into her face. There was no one else in the room. They managed to pull her away. She was screaming hysterically. The staff restrained her, and within moments, she lost consciousness. When she came to, she was in the hotel's medical room. She recounted the entire incident, describing how the terrifying man had been repeatedly slamming her head against the mirror. Later, a staff member revealed that it was the spirit of a doctor, a man who had killed his wife in exactly the same manner. Annie eventually recovered, but she would likely never forget that haunted room 333 at the Langham Hotel. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Horror Nights Case File.